Hi everyone, this is the video for part 2 of the poetry module. And so we're going to talk about this poem, the Latin Deli in Ars Poetica. There's a copy of this annotated version in the folder in Blackboard. And remember, annotations are these little notes that I have over here that kind of explain some things. And so after you watch this video, then you can go ahead and work on your writing assignment that you have for this. You'll have to write a paragraph about this. So again, you need to watch the video first, have some discussion about it before you work on that. Also, before you write that paragraph, you'll need to read the document about topic sentences and developing paragraphs. So make sure to look at that as well. So I'll go through and I'll read this poem, and then I'll go back through and hit some of the highlights where I've annotated it, and kind of talk about what we're seeing here, talk about how that relates to the other poem that we were looking at yesterday, and on some level looking forward to what's going to happen for your first major project, which you will begin working on in the next module. So, the Latin Deli, an Ars Poetica, and I'll just tell you now that an Ars Poetica is a poem about how to write a good poem. And we'll see where in this poem the poet discusses how to write a poem. So, the Latin Deli, an Ars Poetica. Presiding over a Formica counter, plastic mother and child magnetized to the top of an ancient register, the heady mix of smells from the open bins of dried codfish, the green plantains hanging in stalks like votive offerings. She is the patroness of exiles. A woman of no age who is never pretty, who spends her days selling canned memories, while listening to the Puerto Ricans complain that it would be cheaper to fly to San Juan than to buy a pound of Bustelo coffee here, and to Cubans perfecting their speech of a glorious return to Havana, where no one has been allowed to die and nothing to change until then. To Mexicans who pass through, talking lyrically of dólares to be made in El Norte, all wanting the comfort of spoken Spanish, to gaze upon the family portrait of her plain wide face, her ample bosom resting on her plump arms, her look of maternal interest as they speak to her and each other of their dreams and their disillusions, how she smiles understanding when they walk down the narrow aisles of her store, reading the labels of packages aloud as if they were the names of lost lovers. Suspiros, merengues, the stale candy of everyone's childhood. She spends her days slicing jamon y queso and wrapping it in wax paper tied with a string. Plain ham and cheese that would cost less at the A&P, but it would not satisfy the hunger of the fragile old man, lost in the folds of his winter coat, who brings her lists of items that he reads to her like poetry, or the others whose needs she must divine, conjuring up products from places that now exist only in their hearts, closed ports she must trade with. So this poem is about a store, and we might, if you're living in New York City, you might be familiar with this kind of a store. It's like a Latin bodega, but you might have them for you might have West Indian stores like this. We might have Asian stores, Chinese stores like this, or South Asian stores like this. Stores for people who may come from somewhere else and they're looking for this specific food that they remember from home. Just a couple things. I've got some annotations here, and again, you can go through and look at some of these on your own later on, but I'll just go through and explain some of them. Presiding over a Formica counter, and I have over here that Formica is the layers of plastic that are bonded to particle board to create a solid countertop. And you know what that is, really. You may not know the word. I've got a picture here of a Formica counter, right? You've seen that kind of a counter in a kitchen, and it'll also be the kind of counter that you might have in in a store. So she's presiding over a Formica counter. We have a plastic mother and child magnetized to the top of an ancient register. One of the things just to recognize in poems that we don't stop necessarily at the line there. So it's the mother and child magnetized to the top. It's not mother and child magnetized. It's mother and child magnetized to the top of an ancient register. And that mother and child, they're capitalized. We're referring to Jesus's mother and Jesus, right? And so we might have a store here where a woman might have this kind of these religious elements here. So we've got a plastic Jesus and Mary who are going to be on top of the register, and we have the things that we're selling in the store here. Dried codfish, bacalao, some of you may know. Dried codfish, green plantains. If you don't know plantains, no, most of us, I think, know plantains. They are kind of a banana that's not really that sweet, and a cooking banana. And it says that they're hanging here in stalks, like, as it says, votive offerings, right? And so I've got the annotation here about what we mean when we're talking about a votive offering. It says votive offerings are objects displayed in a sacred place for religious purposes, generally in order to gain favor with supernatural forces. And then I say here, since the word like is used to say that the green plantains are similar to votive offerings, this is a simile. So some of you may be familiar with the term, but what we're doing here is we're making a comparison between those things. So she's taking plantains, right, which are just bananas basically, and she's comparing them to something that is used for religious purposes. And it's kind of an interesting thing to say. It's just this basic food, right? Why would she make that kind of comparison between food and something religious? And then, by the way, you know, as we mentioned up earlier, she's going to be talking about that plastic mother and child, which we said is Jesus and Mary. So she's using some religious elements in repeated ways throughout here. So we can ask the question, why might she be doing that? This is a bodega. We don't necessarily think about a bodega as being something religious, but she seems to want to make us think about it in that way. So we might think that the bodega is somehow more important than just a place where you go buy some food, right? There's something, it's almost like a church. So when she's making that comparison, she's telling us how to think about this bodega. So again, just that little line of the green plantains hanging in stalks like votive offerings starts to make us think about that. She says down here that she is the woman working in the store is the patroness of exiles. And as it says here, a patroness is a person who supports with money, gifts, or efforts a person, cause, or charity. That's just a definition. She is a patroness of exiles, so she is supporting those who had to leave their home countries. So how is she supporting them having to leave their home countries, right? Also, that patroness of exiles has some religious elements to it as well. We in Catholicism, we talk about the patron saints. Remember in the previous poem, the mother was praying to those plastic saints. We have patron saints, saints who help out for particular causes. And so she is the patroness of exile. She's going to support these people who come from different countries. And how is it that she potentially does that? If we look down here, she's going to talk about canned memories, which again is an interesting phrase here in my annotation. Says that memories can't be put into a can, right? You can't say, well, you know, I've got this thing that happened to me when I was a kid, and I like to put it in a can and store it on the shelf. You can't do that. That really can't happen. And so, say she is talking about canned food here. And the idea may be that canned food can bring up strong memories. And since she is making this comparison without using like or as, this is a metaphor. So up above, when we were talking about the green plantains, we said that was a simile because she was using the word like, whereas here she's not going to be using the word like or as, and so that's going to be a metaphor. So we might think about how these canned memories, right, how these cans bring up memories for people. Again, this is a store for people who come from other places, right? Other places throughout Latin America. They can buy certain kinds of foods. And so why might the these cans of food that they buy be described as canned memories. Later on, she's down here, she's going to talk about the family portrait of her plain, wide face. And it says this is comparing her face to a family picture. And since it does not use like or as to make the comparison, it is and I'll let you fill that in. We talked about that before. If we don't use like or as, what is that? But if we think about, she's comparing her face to a family portrait. This woman is somebody who works in the bodega. She's not directly related necessarily to the people who come in, right? Anybody might walk into the store. So what is it about that makes her face a family portrait, right? What is it that might seem familiar about her? And so again, we're kind of thinking about this store isn't just a place where we buy food. There's something else going on here. These are people who, again, come from other places. As we say in here, we've got Puerto Ricans complaining that it would be cheaper to fly to San Juan than buy a pound of coffee there, or Cubans perfecting their speech about a glorious return to Havana, or the Mexicans passing through talking lyrically of dólares to be made in El Norte. So we've got all of these people from various places throughout Latin America coming to the store, and what's kind of important about that. And so to talk about this as a family portrait, how does that help? Down here, she says, reading the labels of packages aloud as if they were the names of lost lovers, right? I say there, this is compares reading the labels out. Oh, I've got a typo there. It should say loud. Compare reading the labels out loud to discussing lost lovers. Since she uses as, this is and again, I'll let you fill that in, but you know, people are picking up packages of food and reading them as if they're the names of lost lovers. It's food, right? Well, lost lover, we might think about that, reading that in a very passionate way, right? Something that has a great deal of loss to it. But this is just food, right? And as she's going to say later on, it's the stale candy of everyone's childhood. Why would you speak so passionately about this stale candy from your life? And so, again, be thinking about how all those elements tell us something about these people coming into the store. How is it that they feel about coming into the store? Why is the store potentially matter to them? We've said that it seems like a church, which means it's really important to provide something potentially spiritual. How can a bodega provide some kind of spirituality? How and why? And then down here, we're going to talk about, she spends her days slicing jamón y queso, which is ham and cheese in Spanish. This ham and cheese would cost less at the A&P. The A&P is a grocery store, like saying the Associated. It would cost less at the A&P, but would not satisfy the hunger of the fragile old man. It's interesting that this food there, as I say in here, how could ham and cheese from the A&P not satisfy his hunger as well as the ham and cheese from another store? Is it just that ham and cheese from the A&P, it never gets you full? No, it probably would get you full. What if we think about this hunger as being something else, as I say down here? Is he hungry not just for food, or is he hungry for something else, right? Is there something that he gets from the store that goes beyond potentially food? And then down here, he talks about he reads her list like poetry, right? I said that we'd go back to the beginning about the Ars Poetica, that this is about how to write a poem. She reads, well, a grocery list is usually not something like poetry. As I say here in the note, she uses like, so it's and I'll let you fill in the gap about what that is. Why would she describe a grocery list as poetry? I've just got a list of things that I need. I need plantains, I need bacalao, I need some beans, whatever it is, rice, whatever it is that we need. That's not poetry. But how might it really be poetry for him? Why might this store be much more important for him? So you want to think about how this language is helping us understand that larger idea. So go back and look at this poem some more on your own. You can reread it, look at some of the notes there, then look at the assignment that I gave you. Make sure to look at the document on topic, sentences, and development, and then you'll submit that. And again, as always, let me know if you have any questions.